From the luxurious BlendKit studios in sunny Orlando, Florida, the city beautiful, I'm Kelvin Thompson.
And this is Linda Fudge.
And this is the first topical weekly webinar session of BlendKit 2014 as we wrap up Week 1, Understanding Blended Learning. With me today, making sure that all runs smoothly, is our colleague John Pizzo. Also joining us are our guest expert blended learning instructors, Dr. Alicia Janowski and Dr. Jerry Bergstrom, whom I will introduce more formally in a moment. But first, a little plug. As you can see on screen, we're currently spotlighting a view of one of the beauty spots on UCF's Orlando campus. But those of us here at UCF are just part of the we that is BlendKit 2014. So let's see some of the rest of us. So this space is available for you. Why don't you share a photo of you doing BlendKit 2014 or of your campus or something else that represents your participation. As of, for instance, our friend Dave Goodrich posted the image you see on screen via Twitter last week. Look at that excitement. If you'd like to have your photo displayed here, you can do one of two things. Either one, you could email the photo to blendkit@ucf.edu, or you could post your photo to flickr.com and tag it BlendKit. It will show up in the photo stream for BlendKit 2014, and we'll grab the photo and display it here. Now, as another for instance, take a look at this creative workspace shared by our friend Nori Murphy last week as she got ready to participate in BlendKit 2014 on day one. What a creative workspace, right? So again, feel free to just email your photos to blendkit@ucf.edu if that's more straightforward. Now, speaking of the we who comprise BlendKit 2014, as of today, we are well over 2,500 in number, and based upon the slightly less than half of us who've kindly completed the demographic survey within Canvas, here are some interesting factoids about us. 23% of us are from outside North America. The majority of us are female, over 60%. About 40% of us are already teaching blended courses or have in the past. And almost 90% of us said that we are engaging in BlendKit 2014 because we are interested in blended learning, with more than half saying that we are preparing to teach a blended course within the next year. So I would say that we are off to a pretty good start in our 5-week journey together to explore blended learning. Now, here are some quick observations and reminders before we get to our guests. Many of us have been active on Twitter using the BlendKit 2014 hashtag. Also, Linda has enabled the ability for any of us to create new discussion areas within Canvas. Some of us have already created such topics. For instance, there is a topic focused on workplace learning. And of course, these are in addition to the weekly discussion areas in which you might share and give feedback on the weekly do-it-yourself or DIY tasks. Speaking of such tasks, it looks like a lot of people posted assignments over the weekend. Linda and I and our small team of helpers are playing catch up on grading the assignments from this weekend, so don't panic if you haven't seen a completed grade or if you haven't received a save and share, claim your badge email yet. No worries, it'll get there. And again, if you're not doing the badge thing, that's totally fine. You can go on your merry way, do as little or as much as you want, but if you're into kind of checking those things off and having us believe that you've completed the course, then you just use the assignment section in Canvas to record the evidence of your participation. Right now, though, I'd like to see how we're doing with this week's topic of understanding blended learning. Again, as a reminder, in these weekly webinars, we provide a little capstone for the previous week's topic. So we've been looking at understanding blended learning. So let's see how we're doing with understanding blended learning and how we're doing with conceptualizing the blended learning course you might be designing. Let's hear from you what your basic plans are at this point. We'll do this through reviewing the 3 short polls that we've had open. If you haven't yet replied, please do so now. If you're reviewing the recording of this session, we want your input as well. So please make sure to use the asynchronous participant input form down at the bottom of the screen in the web links pod to share your thoughts. Now, after you submit the form, you'll be able to click a link to see everyone's aggregated responses, but please do not submit the form until after you've created all of your input for today's session. So wait till the end of the session, then click submit. Okay, on to the polls. First, for those of you developing a blended learning course right now, how much of the course do you plan to conduct face-to-face versus online? Let's see what you said. Seeing a little bit of diversity here, with the majority currently, I love seeing live data come in, the majority currently saying less than 50% will be allocated to face-to-face. It's kind of equalizing a little bit as we're speaking here. And then there's some division between more than 50% and 50%. All right. Next, as you were thinking about the relationship between the face-to-face and online portions of your blended course, what are you planning to do face-to-face? There's a lot of options that we've put up here for you. And again, anytime that you've got other, feel free to just put that in the chat window. So other, we'd love to hear what those other things are. Just put them in chat and we'll take a look at those together. But it looks like the biggest number that I'm seeing right now is a lot of small group discussions are valued for face-to-face, and a lot of instructor Q&A face-to-face. Looks like the leading components. But of course, I think we're seeing that there's a lot of diversity in the way that we conceptualize what we might do face-to-face versus online. Speaking of, let's see what you're planning to do online. Looks like the great majority of us are looking to do content presentation online. Other big majority ideas are assignment submissions online and discussions online. And again, with quite a bit of variability in other components as well. So I'd like to encourage you, as we hear from our guests today, please listen for their thought processes in making decisions about how to best blend the face-to-face and online elements based on the needs of their course and the needs of their students. Now, we're going to start with the questions submitted via the Google form last week as the basis for a moderated mini panel discussion. And we're going to do that every week. We'll put out a Google form for you, we'll put it in the announcements, and you can contribute your questions ahead of time. Now, during today's discussion, please use the chat window to post any clarifications you would like Alicia or Jerry to address during the discussion time together. And if you think of a brand new question, feel free to post that in the chat window as well. We'll do our best to fit a couple of extemporaneous questions into the session at the end. Now, and as a reminder, if you experience any volume discrepancies as we go back and forth between speakers today, please adjust the volume as necessary on your device. Okay, so let's get started. Please let me now formally introduce Dr. Jerry Bergstrom from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, where he helps a variety of faculty within UW-Milwaukee's Learning Technology Center, and also teaches in the biological sciences there, has a long and distinguished career in the biological sciences. And Dr. Alicia Janowski from the University of Central Florida, who is a stellar psychology instructor who teaches in a variety of modalities and is much sought after in our institution for her experience as a great instructor. So we're going to start with the first question that was submitted to our Google form this past week. Let's see if I can get these up. Oh, I went right past all that stuff. Here's the first question. So someone submitted this question. I work with faculty who believe that blended learning is just another fad destined to die out as all fads do. They don't see the point of learning about and investing in something that won't last. How can I convince them that blending has merit? Why don't we start with Alicia and then we'll hear from Jerry. Alicia, what do you think about that?
I've seen a lot of research on blended courses in comparison to online courses, in comparison to face-to-face, and most have shown that students and faculty most prefer the blended environment. So with that in mind, I don't see that going anywhere. I think it offers the best of both worlds, not only for students and faculty, but I'll go so far as to say administration, as especially here at UCF, as student enrollment continues to grow, but physical space remains stagnant, and trying to balance needs for large classes and smaller classes, the blended approach allows more students to have a face-to-face component to their courses and scheduling.
Great, thanks, Alicia. Jerry, what do you think?
I concur with everything Alicia said, of course. It's been around for 10 or more than 10 years, I think. So I kind of don't think of it as a fad. My personal take on blended learning, which I've been doing myself for about 5 years, is it's incredibly liberating. I have freedom to do things that I don't have in traditional face-to-face classes of the same courses, for example. And performance of the students over the years has been at least not any different than the students I used to teach in the past. So it has substance and it already has endurance.
Super, thanks, Jerry. So we're going to go from more broad to a little bit more specific now. Another one of us asked this question. He or she said, it's still unclear to me why and when a classroom component should be added to a blended learning design. I currently teach online and have synchronous interactive webinars on a weekly basis with my students. What are the pedagogical reasons for having face-to-face sessions? Jerry, why don't you start?
Well, Alicia also mentioned that students tend to prefer blended learning. I think it's because students want a face-to-face interaction, a personal interaction with the instructor. I also teach online courses, and we are always concerned about instructor presence in a fully online course. That's not as much a concern in a blended course. I think I'll stop there.
Okay. Alicia, would you add anything to that?
I would definitely say ditto. Students like knowing who we are, and that is lacking a lot in online courses. They also like knowing who each other are and feeling that sense of community within their classroom environment. And I think from an instructor perspective too, many faculty that I speak to are often concerned about things like academic integrity in the online environment, and they will choose to do high-stakes testing and things like that face-to-face.
Now, let's get to the nitty-gritty here. This question has come up in some form or another, not just in the question submission, but also on Twitter, also in the reading reactions on people's blogs this past week. Little shout out, by the way, if you haven't looked already, there's a great blogging community forming, and we'll put the link to the blog list in the chat in a little bit. But you ought to take a look at what our cohort is saying on their blogs. But this question's come up a lot. Is there a magic balance or a recommended ratio of face-to-face activities versus online activities? For instance, is 50-50 a good split? Alicia?
I wish there was a magic number for the split. I think it depends on the size of your class, the what's the word I'm looking for? The level of the course. So when I do GEP courses as blended, for example, I prefer to see them a little bit more than just send them off on their own without a little more guidance. So with those, I do more of a 60-30 split. In upper level courses, I do more of a 50-50. Graduate courses, it's usually more of a 30-70.
Sure. That's kind of practical. Jerry, what about you?
Well, my course is 50-50. I teach biology, and it just seemed reasonable to me to put my content online and have them spend about, well, first of all, they have to spend homework time reading textbook assignments and doing quizzing and so on, and I just basically have given them half of the class time to complete that. But the answer to the question really is it depends on discipline, it seems to me. It depends on the size of the class, as Alicia pointed out. Not mentioned yet is something I think I learned early, and I think everybody in your BlendKit program must learn, and that's something about backward design. And it really depends on what you want your students to be able to do and how you can best achieve that. I find that a 50-50 split works for me. Others will find surely something different. The only thing I would leave you with is you need to be consistent. If it's 30% face-to-face it should be on a regular scheduled basis and not haphazard, I think. That's my opinion. Haphazard, or even scheduled, not haphazard, but scheduled irregularly, I guess is what I'm getting at. Students find it a lot easier to know on a regular routine basis when they'll meet and when they will be doing things at home. So that's my take.
Could I add one
Yeah,
thing?
please, Alicia.
One other thing I would maybe think on is not all of us always have the option of how much our classes will meet. Sometimes that's handled at an administrative level, and we have to let that scheduling drive versus pedagogy. But I have had faculty in my department who have done more of a haphazard meeting. We'll meet every third Tuesday when the moon is full, but not when Venus is in retrograde, kind of a thing. And I don't think that works as well. I don't think students then feel that sense of community, and they often wonder, why are we doing this? So much like we're always told with online classes that there needs to be a consistency in what we do, I think the same thing goes with a blended course, where to just do things on the fly doesn't always work as it would in a face-to-face.
Excellent points. And a quick shout out, Jerry mentioned backward design, and I've seen several people in the last week or so tweeting using our BlendKit2014 hashtag, talking about backward design. And if you're not familiar with that phrase, it basically just means starting with the end in mind. Now, a lot of people would say, well, that's just good design. There's nothing backward about that. But starting with what it is you want your students to walk away with, what's going to be assessed, what's the evidence that you're going to collect that students indeed have mastered the competencies that you've laid out for them, starting there and then working your way toward content and activities and so forth is what Jerry's referring to as backward design. And there's a lot of resources already in the Twitter stream. I'd encourage you to take a look at that. Okay, continuing to zoom in a little bit. You guys have touched on this a wee bit, Alicia and Jerry, but could you comment on what, and I know it is going to vary a little bit in terms of what course you're teaching and so forth, but could you comment on what you do online versus face-to-face in your blended teaching? Alicia, we'll start with you.
My general breakdown for those courses is more of a flipped design, so I have them doing more reading and lecture content sorts of things online, as many of you indicated you would do in your courses. And then when we come together in a face-to-face meeting, it's meant to be more discussion, some Q&A about what did you learn online that you have questions on, but really let's get into talking about other issues. I mean, I'm a psychologist, so it's a lot of, case studies or problem solving or research questions, and trying to capture the more critical thinking elements and letting the content part be driven online.
Great. And Jerry, let's hear from you. And some of our participants today have asked if you would perhaps speak up a little bit more loudly than you have been, maybe speak into the mic just a little bit. That'd be helpful. What do you think, Jerry?
Is that better?
I think so. We'll see.
Okay. Well, I'll speak louder anyway. I also teach a flipped model course, I guess. I arrived at it after doing a semester of partial lecture in class and finding that really quite unsatisfactory. So now I put all my content and recorded lectures basically online, and students need to come prepared to the class. They take a pre-quiz before coming to class. They most recently I've used an online platform, e-text platform, and an online e-text, and it is interactive, and they need to complete small, short graded assignments also before coming to class. So in class, it's a discussion model. I use clickers for participation, so there's no wait for right or wrong versus wrong answers, but I use that, and I use what I call index card exercises, where students work in groups to answer case studies, probably something similar to what Alicia does.
Awesome.
Over.
Now, Jerry, I'm going to swing to you with this question. As we look at the face-to-face and the online components, and we're thinking about all that stuff, we hear this a lot, and the course and a half phenomenon. And I'm going to you first, Jerry, because that's That's a phrase that's kind of been associated with University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. Some of your colleagues there have coined that phrase. So can you talk about what are some ways instructors can ensure that they have not created a course and a half? And what is a course and a half, and how can they avoid that?
Well, the glib answer is trial and error. What we find when we work with faculty is they do tend to put more things into either online or blended courses than they would have chosen to do had they already offered the course. So a certain amount of trial and error, a certain amount of experience. I would suggest that everyone who is designing a blended coursework or share some of what they have in mind, either with facilitators such as myself and the folks at the BlendKit, I guess, and other experienced faculty. And it's easy to say don't do too much. Err on the side of doing less and build more into your course at a later time. Over.
What about you, Alicia? What would you add?
I think there's a lot of truth to that, but it's not just about blended courses. I think it goes with online too, as we find, ooh, this is a cool link and this is a cool activity and there's so much that I could have them do. That's all wonderful, but is it asking too much? So maybe go back to what your learning objectives were, and again, what your assessments are, what you're hoping your outcomes will be, and think about what is essential, what is supplementary, and help your students figure out where they should be spending the most of their time.
Can I add something?
Please.
Yes. I think it's also helpful to know what your institution expects of students in the way of homework, the ratio of homework to classwork. I think we have something like 3 hours of home work per hour of classroom time or something like that. And when I designed my course, I tried to imagine what that would be. So the issue is how well I hit the target, and I didn't the first time. But you learn as you do. That's the only other thing I would add.
I think, personally, I think that's a great transition to this last of our structured questions. And Alicia and I have already talked about this a little bit. She said, what in the world are you asking me here with this question? But for Jerry and Alicia, for your benefit, in our readings this past week, a more traditional structured instructional design model for designing blended courses was contrasted with what we might think of as a more flexible, emergent, responsive, pedagogically responsive, emergent process. How do you approach the design of blended courses, and how do your institutions support you in your chosen design processes? I'm going to switch things up a little bit and ask Jerry, would you kind of continue on with what you were talking about with kind of the thinking of the ratios of the institution? That seems to have a bearing here. Could you comment on that, and then we'll hear from Alicia.
Well, I'm not sure how to attach that last comment of mine to this question, but let me maybe I'll hit it again on the second pass around the track. So I work with the Learning Technology Center, and that is our institutional support when people want to design online or blended courses. In thinking about an emergent process, I'm looking at the words up here. I do invoke some flexibility when I teach, but I forewarn the students that there may be some additional opportunities for extra credit, or I may tell them something like, if we find that we are doing an exercise that I'm getting positive feedback on, I might put a few more of those in. If they are graded assessments, I make some accommodation for that. I do, in other words, like to experiment in a course in progress. I don't do as much of that as I might like, because I think the students will rebel. But I do some of it, and I forewarn the students. If the traditional structured instructional design model is a rigidified thing, and I can't tell from the question whether it is, I don't know what that is. I think when we train people, when people come to us for training, they go to a workshop at which we explain backwards design, explain the need to put content online, the concept of a flipped course. We tell them these things, and I guess there's structure to that. We let people develop whatever they think is appropriate, and we render help and constructive criticism as people do this. But I guess I'm also not quite clear of an emergent process, what an emergent process is, except in my context, I taught a pretty lousy first course and a much, much better second one. So that's what emerged from my experience.
That's great. Thanks, Jerry. Alicia is snickering. So, Alicia, comments?
For me, I'm not always, as I mentioned, given a lot of say in what my face-to-face versus online time will be. This is when you have the room, so this is when you will do your face-to-face. So I go from that perspective of this is what I have to do face-to-face. This is what my objective is for the course, and these are the assessments that I want to make sure are embedded. So how can I best capitalize on the time that I see them? And that's how I designed that course. When I think emergent process, I think more of what I maybe do in my face-to-face classes of let's see where we end today. This is what I'm hoping to, as my endpoint may or may not happen. And oh, you guys brought up some interesting points. So, next time I want to heighten on that and work from that perspective. I don't do that as much because that face-to-face time is so precious and limited. That I may take that information instead and carry it over into an online discussion board, or for those of you who are more interested and want additional resources, let's set up a little group over here to talk about it. And then again, kind of stay more to that traditional, this is what we are going to do in this segment face-to-face today, because this is what we have. So I don't know if that kind of gets at some of those issues. I will say my biggest issue with blended courses and flipped courses for that matter is what I'm hoping they do online is not always what they feel they need to be doing online, and they may feel instead that, oh, this is really just a face-to-face class, and I just don't have to come as much. Mm-hmm. And so I think things like Jerry was saying about doing assessments online of what that online content was, what they're supposed to bring forward is really important, because otherwise you may start finding that instead you're giving a lot of lectures in the face-to-face time that you didn't want to do. And that's what emerged from my first time teaching a fixed mode class.
That's awesome. Hey, listen, you guys have been great, Alicia and Jerry. And so really, believe it or not, our time with our guest panelists is at an end. But if you have any other questions, Linda and I will compile those and forward those to Jerry and Alicia. For instance, if you're catching the recording of this session, use that link in the web links pod down at the bottom of the screen that says viewing the recorded session, access polls here. There's a little spot that you can post questions in, or any of you are in the chat room during the rest of the time, put in your questions. We'll get those to Jerry and Alicia, and we'll try to get some responses back out to the group. Now, speaking of Linda, as we wrap up today's webinar, we want to touch base on some housekeeping items. So Linda, please take us home.
Okay, first of all, the majority have been saying that you're getting a lot out of the Blendkit course. We received some comments this first week that indicate some of you are finding the format hard to connect with. First of all, I just want to remind you that this is a professional development course. It's up to you to decide what you do. Okay, you can follow the assignments that are in the course and just use those and work through them. You can decide, I just want to do the reading and comment on that. It's up to you. The same thing with the social network. There is no requirement for you to go in and do the social networking. That is strictly at your decision. For those of you who commented that they couldn't get to readings for week 1 and 2 are available, and the EPUBs will come once we have all the readings updated for the latest changes. Okay, when you're in Canvas, remember to click on the modules in the left, and then you'll see the activities for each week, and plus the assignments right under that. If you have any questions, again, send us comments either through Canvas or through the weekly email at blendkit.ucf.edu. Okay, some of the things that have come up in the past week, we questioned the usefulness of the blueprint challenge. That's really to help you go back to the point of looking at your course and to put it in a format so that you then can make questions to really address what you want in your course so you don't end up with that course and a half. If the particular documents we give you don't work, feel free to use whatever program you want. Just give it back to us in the course in a format that we can read. I believe most programs would do a PDF, so if you send them back to us in a PDF, that's great. Majority of you think the organization works well, but you're challenged keeping up. Again, do what works for you, what's going to give you the most output out of this course. If you're looking for a group in Canvas, feel free to go into discussions to create a group. Also, you have the ability to create your own groups within discussions. If you go back to the Getting Started page, you're going to find instructions on how to do that. If you haven't completed the Week 1 feedback form, please go in and complete it. We use that information to make changes as we go along, but also to make changes for any future iterations of this course. Later today, you're going to be receiving an email message from us for guidance on how you're going to get into Week 2 or what we're going to do for the Week 2 focus. It's going to be on interaction possibilities available in a blended course, and you'll have an opportunity to receive some help and some hands-on training on your version of the course, and that's where our assignments are going to be. Remember, this is not a linear process to go through the course. You just need to find out what works for you and what you want to learn and what's helpful to you.
That's great, Linda. Now, if I can just make one plug, here's the plug. Just what Linda said, make it work for you. If you want us to say, yes, you completed the course, then make sure you're using the Canvas assignments and complete at least one learning activity each week. Now, this has come up some. I just want